You're listening to the Holistic Nootropics Podcast, your home for holistic, evidence-based cognitive enhancement strategies. And now your host, Eric Levi.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Nootropics Podcast, where we discuss using nootropics, biohacking, and nutrition to help you boost your cognition. My name is Eric. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, and we have an awesome episode of the podcast for you today. Before we jump into it, just a quick reminder, if you are new to the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube or you are listening on your favorite podcast player, then please take a second and remember to subscribe. If you enjoy what you're listening, then leave a comment on that given platform, especially if you're listening to this in podcast form. Head on over to Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy the podcast, leave the podcast a 5-star review, because that helps us climb the ranks and bring you bigger and better content. If you are someone who is into nootropics and biohacking, you're into supplementation, and you want to find the best supplements on the market today, then head on over to holisticnootropics.com and download a copy of my free supplement buying guide. This is a fully comprehensive supplement buying guide that will walk you through ingredient by ingredient on how to find the best quality supplements and nootropics on the market today. Because let's face it, there is a lot of junk out there on the market, a lot of people trying to make a quick buck. The supplement industry is a $120 billion industry. 119.9 billion of that is absolute trash and ends up in the toilet. And let's face it, when you take that stuff, it doesn't even help you in the first place. So head on over to holisticnootropics.com, get that supplement buying guide. And with that, let's jump into the podcast today with our special guest, Dr. Joseph Antoun. Dr. Joseph is a trained physician, longevity pioneer, and the CEO of L-Nutra, Inc., a cutting-edge nutra-technology company that is the first of its kind to focus on providing people the knowledge and products to live to 110 years old and beyond. Woo! As CEO of L-Nutra, Dr. Antoun works with one of the leading global researchers in the area of longevity, Professor Valter Longo, director of the Longevity Center at USC. Together, they provide education and products to support a lifestyle that extends health span, of course, years of healthy living. Dr. Joseph, welcome to the Holistic Nootropics Podcast.
Hey, thank you, Eric, and great introduction. You just energized me, so I'm looking forward to drop a lot of information for your audience today.
That's cool, because I'm out of breath. I'm going to pass this one over to you to carry the weight here. I need to take a nap. Yeah. So, Dr. Joseph, I was telling you before we jumped on, this topic of longevity has been top of mind for me recently. I'm so many questions for you about this topic. I'm so excited to get into it. I know a lot of listeners and viewers of the Holistic Nootropics Podcast are definitely interested in this topic. But before we get into all that, I would love to know your origin story. How did you get into health and wellness? Why did you become a doctor? And ultimately, what brought you into this specific focus of longevity?
Great question. When I grew up, and I always felt that I had a lot of compassion for people who either had a health condition or were unfortunate in life to afford to get the best, whether it's food or healthcare or housing, so I always felt like I had it in me to kind of give back to society, try to help the unfortunate. I had a great parents, great nest at home, and always was taught to give and give time and give what you have. And then getting into, post high school, I decided to get into medicine, wanting to help patients and with treatments and supposedly reverse their chronic diseases, right? And I get into medicine and I was a big nerd, so MD and PhD and 2 masters and wanted to become a cardiologist and help people with preventing heart attacks or reversing that. And then in my rotations at the hospital, and even in the best hospitals in the world, Harvard's top number 1 is Mass General, and a lot of credibility for these doctors. They're seeing patients who are already sick, so they have to treat them with something. But the system that I was learning is basically trying to meet a person after they become sick, ask them a few questions, find out what they have, and subscribe them. Let's use a little bit of the consumer here language. Subscribe them on a pill every day, and I wish it was 1 pill. It was 5 pills, right? The cholesterol pill, the blood pressure pill, the blood glucose pill, the aspirin pill, and none of those was reversing anything. It's at best they were controlling the health condition, and then the patient comes back after a year and didn't follow. It wasn't actually even given the chance to follow a great lifestyle medicine approach. So they come back and the blood sugar is a little bit higher. So you add a little bit of another drug, or you add the dose and you add cholesterol drug. So basically, I felt that we're taking the most talented people called physicians, and we're training them about how to become prescribers of drugs. And I decided to change that. So I left, graduated, but then left and went into health policy and public health. I did Harvard and Hopkins, and thinking about I should change the entire policy making of the system from going into sick care and building a prescription system into a preventive system, and then started a global career on advising different ministries of health, and adding to that in academia, I started teaching health systems reform and launched a journal for health systems reform to help quickly global or the global economies to talk faster on health and not do the same mistakes again. But pushing for prevention, you get always the same answer. Every head of Ministry of Health or every kind of senior leader say, of course we should prevent, of course we should. And then when it comes to practicality, you recommend that people eat healthy, but guess what? If I'm hungry now and you put a great burger in front of me, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to say, okay, I'll diet after, right? And then you tell them not to smoke, but if you're out partying and you're having fun, you grab a cigarette. And so the micro incentives in life, they always win over this probabilistic future, gain of 1-2 years of life, and people go back and they default to short-term moments of joy, whether it's smoking, whether it's drinking, whether it's sitting on a couch rather than running, or whether eating a burger. So I felt that to beat that lifestyle, to tip the balance from recommendations that are applied into really helping people make the healthy decision, you have to do two things. You have to consumerize prevention. You have to swap that burger with a product that it tastes good, that is great, but is healthy and is going to change that body. And this is what I feel I'm doing today with the fasting and the fasting-mimicking diet. We'll talk about that. And number two, you want to make the healthy choice the easy choice. So a lettuce should not be more expensive than a burger. And when you're standing in the aisle waiting for your, at any of the grocery stores and waiting for your turn to pay, you should not see 60 chocolates and 60 whatever. You should see healthy stuff. So, and the gym and the walking. And so how can we make the healthy choice the easy one? Today we have the unhealthy choice the easy one. It's easy to order food at home. We're making that easier now with Uber Eats and everything. It's easier to pick up a chocolate the last minute before you get on the aisle. And it's the cheapest thing is to go and buy a KFC or a McDonald's. So I'm not working on that yet. I feel I worked a little bit on making the easy choice the healthy one through my through giving back and educating future generations. At University of Chicago, I was head of health policy. So help people think this way. Financial incentives. People are, at the end of the day, you change your behavior if you have two things or three, let's say: education and awareness, financial incentive, and products and services. If these are available, you're going to go through that route. And so I contribute a little bit to that through my journal, through some of the educations, but I decided to focus on consumerizing prevention. And at that time, I was, again, a doctor with certain health policy knowledge. I didn't have any business knowledge. I didn't know how to develop a product. So a lot of my advisors, professors at Harvard, they recommended that I join the biotech industry to go and learn how you bring a product in healthcare, how you launch it, how you globalize it. And so I joined Lilly, one of the top biotech companies, and Lilly kind of was very kind to expose me to different parts of the business, whether it's corporate affairs, whether it's global launches, whether it's pricing and reimbursement and discovery. And I had a very, very interesting ride with the company, and at the end left and built my own consulting company to go and find researchers who work on preventive products. I always talk about this story. I met the CEO of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. We met and we were sitting over a margarita at O'Hare Airport, and he was telling me, "You guys get everything wrong." I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's an aging researcher. For me, it was like, this coming from mainstream medicine, this is like what you're doing in your life, right? And he was like, if you think that cancer is different than Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's is different than cardiovascular disease and they're different than diabetes, you're wrong. I'm like, what do you mean? They're completely different system, different diseases. He's like, if they were completely independent, why you don't get your first heart attack at age 20? You always get it later stage of life. Why you don't get most cancers at age 20? Where you can get your Alzheimer's, even if you have the ApoE gene, you're not going to get it at age 22, and you're not going to, etc. So for him, is like you age, and depending on how you age, how fast you age, this is going back to exercise and diet and nutrition, all of that. If you age in an unhealthy way, one of the systems will fall first. You call it Alzheimer's if it's in the brain, but by the way, if it was in the brain, a year after it would be the heart, and you call it a heart attack, but it's all the same. It's how you preserve your body, and it's the aging process is the biggest determinant. Biological aging is the biggest determinant of your health, of what's going to happen to your health, and how soon you're going to have a health condition. So I put it together, and I was like, if I find a technology that can slow down aging, we would hit the jackpot. And I started learning about aging research and longevity, and what could slow down aging. And there's a lot of approaches. There's the lifestyle approach, but it's the diet, the food, the stress, the sleep, and the social capital, and giving and love and receiving love. And you have a lot of hundreds of billions of dollars now being thrown at a potential longevity pill, and a lot of research happening on what chemical entity could come into the body and slow down aging. So at that time, I felt that my call was for nutrition, because for me, it's the only pill we put in the body 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day. And it's a safe intervention. Every pill has side effects, right? And it works on such a specific funnel within, whether it's a receptor on the cell or whatever, that it does something and it does something else. And I felt like for aging, if you want to bring me personally a product to consume for the next 30 years, in order to add another 2 to 3 years or 5 years, it better be super, super safe, because I don't want to risk anything on the short term. So I decided to go with nutrition, feeling that it's the biggest signal to the body. You put it in your mouth every day, the day you're born to the day that you die. And it's safe, meaning it's socially acceptable to go through that path. And at the same time, I met Valter Longo, who was introduced to me by the CEO of the Bach Institute. And Valter Longo was just, was one of the best things that happened to my life. A guy that's religious about science of food. He treats food like medicine. So everything he does is like lab trials and mice trials and then human trials. And this is how they call us today, the nutra-tech of the word, the biotech is the nutra-tech of the word. And he was so ethical about it. And then he donates everything he does to create Cures Foundation and charities. So I found that very credible, ethical person. And then he discovered fasting and the value of fasting on the cell and the body, and preventing health condition and supporting people with health conditions. So decided to join force and come and bring everything he discovers to market. So he had founded this company called L-Nutra that I'm now the CEO of. L stands for longevity, dashes through nutrition. This is what L-Nutra means. And we basically partner now with many universities, but the main university backer is USC, and the main science comes from Valter Longo. And we study how can we bring fasting to the market. We have mimicked the benefits of fasting with food, and then we study if you have a health condition, what kind of food as medicine can come in and help you better manage that condition. So long answer, but I think it was an interesting kind of bridge between why aging, why fasting, and how can that impact longevity.
Well, I'm so glad that you shared all that, because to get to where you are now, the fact that you started off as a physician and you were going to go into cardiology, it takes balls to go through medical school and then to look at the end and go, this is not what I want to do. Not because I don't love it, but because the system itself is so bad that I couldn't bring my most valuable self to it. And I feel like a lot of doctors struggle with that, especially right now, where because I'm like pre-med, and my plan is to go to naturopathic medicine school, and I'm going through all of these classes: organic chemistry, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. And I'm looking at all this stuff and I go, yeah, this is like really important. I'd imagine as a doctor, you have to know that. But how come every time I go to the doctor, I'm in there for 6 minutes, I tell them what's wrong, and they have one of 3 pills they're going to give me? Because if that's the case, what is the point of a doctor right now if that's all you're going to get? And that's a GP, I get it. If I go to a cardiologist, if I have a heart condition or whatever, cardiologist is probably going to say either take this statin or we need to do surgery. Okay, great. Again, you didn't really tell me the thing to keep me out of this office. You just gave me a thing that you were going to do because those are one of the 2 answers that you have. Yeah. So I think.
Yeah, what you're saying is so important, actually. I spent years trying to figure out where is and the doctor is not at fault. The doctor will act based on credible information taught in medical school. The problem is the system was built with a lot of lobbying, with a lot of influence, where in order to be called credible, you have to go through A, B, C, D, and E, and the big bucks, pharma companies would do that and play through it. Unfortunately, nutrition company, they didn't decide to go through that process. I mean, because the doctor is prescribing what was qualified based on regulatory body to be safe and effective, right? So he's doing the right job in terms of saying, look, you never showed me that this nutrition can cure cancer. You never showed me that this supplement can, you say, no, it has this ingredient, it has vitamin. Say, show me a randomized clinical trial that if a patient has cancer, stage 2 breast cancer, you give them this supplement, and the other arm, you didn't give any supplement, and it showed an outcome in 5 years. And the problem, and you said, you alluded to it, is the supplement and the nutrition industry are as complicit into this because they decided to go fast towards market and business. Nutrition companies decided to sell us sugar for 30 years and then protein for the next 30 years and now fat for the next 30 years. It's just a migration of what's a la mode to sell. And they never cared to sit and do the really hard work of developing clean, effective nutrition. And they didn't want to wait 10 years to test it with the FDA. They don't want to come and say, I have a solution for you, doc, because then the doctor will prescribe it. The doctors are as frustrated as we are. And the cardiologist sitting, my colleagues sitting, looking at their patient, they know that this 55-year-old guy has high cholesterol because he's stressed, he's 55, he's aging, and he has a belly, and he's eating unhealthy, and they know that he can reverse that. It's just nobody taught them, nor armed them with credible information to do it. So it's both part of the alley are faulty. It's just you have a biotech, they're doing their job of bringing, they're in the business of bringing you medicine, and they're saying, hey, you think lifestyle medicine is a solution? Go and show it. And lifestyle medicine companies are taking the fast route. They want to publish a book, they want to sell you a diet, they change the next year the ingredient, the year after another ingredient, and it's all based on business and revenues. And I think this is where we come as a first nutrition company taking the biotech route. We have, at our stage, we're just 12 years old, but we have more clinical trials on our food than multi-billion-dollar big nutrition businesses. We're going to cross soon our 30-second clinical trials. We have tens and hundreds of preclinical. This is clinical trials. And this is what the market needs. And guess what happens? Because of the clinical trials and the credibility, we have 14,000 clinics registered with us to prescribe our food in there or recommend our food in their clinics. 14,000 crossed. And we've only been 6 years in the market. So I think what I'm finding is a lot of doctors are hungry to do the right thing. For no one, the story is like mine. No one goes to med school because they think, hey, let me pay $300,000 upfront and maybe make, it's a big, it's not as good as an investment as in the 90s. But I think there's a compassion to the patient. It's just what we get taught in med school is what is safe, proven to be safe and effective, and only few industries took that route. The other industries decided to take shortcuts to the market.
And I think this is what's so exciting about this functional medicine movement, which is you're starting to see, first of all, you're starting to see a lot more interest amongst people who are sick of the sick care system. There's a lot of people who are now on their fourth, fifth, sixth pharmaceutical drug. They've been on and off this antidepressant, that antidepressant. They've been on this stat and that stat, and they're on this blood sugar thing, that blood sugar, they're on this Alzheimer's thing, that Alzheimer's thing. And at some point, a rational thinking person starts to understand this isn't working. And you start to say, as long as you're living a somewhat cognizant life, and I know there's plenty of people who are kind of living in a daze, but at some point, I think everybody says, I don't want to do this anymore. What else is there? And, I'm in this biohacking space, and I had a guy on here who's he's a very popular biohacker, on the social media and all that stuff. He actually said it to me in a way that made sense. He's like, biohacking makes health fun. And yeah, there's a lot of corniness to biohacking. It's a little bit of a cash grab for a lot of different companies. There's way too many supplements on the market. There's way too much marketing, but there are some things that you can get that empower you as a person to take charge of your health. Personally, I think one of those things is the Oura Ring. The Oura Ring, I wear it every day. And it tracks your sleep, but it tracks your heart rate at night, tracks your heart rate variability. Now they got the third generation, and you can do some fitness stuff. Some people like to use the Whoop strap, and I think that's also really cool. These different monitors that you can wear, we're empowering, and then of course blood glucose monitors. We're starting to empower people with this really simple user experience, this UI user interfaces that are simple to read. They almost kind of gamify the whole thing, because I know for me it was a complete psychological game at this point. When I got my Oura Ring and I had my first night of drinking, and then I went to bed and I saw how high my heart rate went, how bad my deep sleep was, my recovery score, my sleep, all these things. When there's something about that number, it does a psychological twist on you, and you go, yeah, maybe I'm not going to drink as much anymore. And then you start applying that to food. You start applying that to bedtimes, and before you know it, you start building these healthy habits.
The if you want, they call him the father of business schools, Peter Drucker. He has a very famous saying: "If you cannot measure, you cannot manage." Right? Mm-hmm. And this is what you're hitting home on. Actually, if even the weight loss industry, if you want to do one thing that's repeatedly shown to be the most effective to lose weight, is you get a weight scale and you measure your weight every morning. When you measure, you manage. And what you're saying is I'm 100% supportive of, is how can we, beyond managing sickness, how can we empower every individual to manage their lifestyle, right? And it's sleep and stress and weight and definitely these the digital support that you're mentioning will change a lot of things. Measuring your sleep, measuring your weight, the same thing that happens in the weight industry. And nobody tells you that because they always want to go after the food. But actually, if you weigh yourself every morning, is a tip for everyone, you're going to see that the day you go up a little bit, like, oh, I'm going to eat less today or tomorrow. And that's the best decision you can make. Same for sleep, same for others. So definitely support what you're saying. And in that sense, the biohacking is more of a self-awareness, measuring my parameter and better managing them. And that's going to be critical in lifestyle medicine moving forward.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about lifestyle medicine and where fasting comes into it, because, I know fasting it's a very trendy topic, and it's just so funny how, 10 years ago, you talk about somebody about fasting, and this was just only in religion. This was like a thing, the Jews, we did it, once a year, Muslims do it for a whole month, and then people would do it here and there for different purposes, but nobody really did it as a thing. Like now you have fasting challenges, and, there's a lot of really interesting research coming out about fasting, and a lot of it is tied to longevity. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, kind of your own personal experience with fasting and what you're seeing on your end as far as, the clinical trials and implementing this into your business.
Yeah. So I want to simplify this a little bit to the audience. What separates fasting from any other dietary lifestyle, right? There's a lot of diets. You can go keto, you can go low carb, you can go. Why fasting became so trendy? Fasting is has two components that are so unique to fasting and kind of took it to become very effective and highly adopted. The first component is that it creates fast a disbalance in calories. So you can lose weight by eating a little bit less every day. When you fast, obviously you're eating nothing. So that disbalance gets you a fast correction. And a lot of people love the fast correction. And it happens so that if you skip breakfast, that's convenient for most people going to work. That's convenient for most people who are late night eaters. They wake up in the morning, they don't have a lot of appetite. So the convenience plus the sharp calorie drop made it attractive for, at the end of the day, 73% of Americans have some level of overweight they want to get rid of. So for most people, it made it convenient and get them fast results. But the core value add, what we call USP, or the unique selling point of fasting, why it stood out pretty fast, is the same concept of crisis. And I'll compare the body fasting to, say, a CEO of a company that has a budget to run the company. So say you need $2 million to run your company, and the body needs 2,000 calories a day to operate. Let's just simplify the numbers a little bit. If I come to you and I'm your funder, and you say, you know what, you need 2 million, I'm going to give you 0, right? So the normal diet, the other diets, will give you 1.8 million. So your bank account drops gradually. On a low-calorie diet, you lose the weight gradually, and you adapt to it. You have enough in the bank to adjust. When I come and I give you 0, I mean, not only your bank account is dropping by 2 million every month, but it's a big crisis. So what you're going to do, you're going to go inside your company, you're going to restructure the company. You're going to cut some of the ineffective expenditure. You're going to let some people go. You're going to optimize technology. You're going to focus on whatever sells first. So there's a lot of structure and functional change that you lead, which otherwise with another diet, if I give you 1.9 million instead of 2 million, you wouldn't have done. So that's scientifically what we call autophagy, or meaning putting enough pressure on the cell to say, I'm not going to wait for just fat breaking down the reserves and coming little bit by little to me. I'm going to go and eat the inside and optimize and try to get by and survive with what I have. And autophagy won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016, so that was a big declenching factor of making a big marketing splash behind it. People started reading, and fasting was the only diet today that we know scientifically that can impact both dropping the weight fast and rejuvenating a cell. And that mixage kind of is great for healthy aging, for a longevity lifestyle, for better managing certain conditions. And this is what kind of fueled fasting to go pretty fast.
And I think keto definitely plays a role, because when people started hearing about keto and this idea of sugar burning versus fat burning,
Yes.
and then I think, especially in my world, it like the ketone cognitive benefits. A lot of these like A-type people, and I feel this myself. If I can get into, I know I don't like measure my ketones, so I don't know if I'm technically in ketosis, but I definitely can do long stretches of longer time restricted feeding windows where I don't eat. And, those last like couple hours, I'm hungry, but then my brain definitely feels like it hits another gear, and you kind of, it's much more accessible to get into that flow state, which is really attractive.
Yeah, I think key to the two things to the word is one, it introduced ketogenesis and what could happen in fasting. I mean, fasting is it's like a deeper keto adoption, but also introduced the notion of fat and healthy fat in the diet, right? I mean, before keto, it was all about protein and please no fat and reduce carbs, but this notion of healthy fats as well, in that not all fat is bad. These are two, I think, positive externalities of the keto diet.
Yeah. And, working with someone like Dr. Valter Longo, he's famous for the fasting-mimicking diet, which I'll admit, I read his book and I didn't really understand it. So maybe you could kind of explain how that works, because I know the selling point of it is that, well, it's a much more accessible way for people to get the benefits of fasting without doing the hard fasting. And I think that's definitely appealing, but I don't really understand the science behind it. So maybe you could break that down a little bit.
Yeah. So why to with food and how or fasting mimicking diet is two reasons and two if you want approaches to this. Is a lot of people, when you tell them, are you doing fasting, say, yeah, I'm doing the 16-8, which basically they're skipping breakfast, they're prolonging the overnight fast by 4 hours, so they're staying 16 hours without food. And if you ask them why they're doing this, a lot of them would tell you, I'm controlling my weight, but also I think I want to rejuvenate my cells and live longer, and it's called autophagy, etc. The problem is, going back to credibility versus and randomized clinical science, is there's no article showing that at hour 16 in humans there's autophagy happening, right? And actually there will never be 1 hour, because we're different, right? If you're very thin, very fit, you don't have any reserve, and you run in the morning time, you're going to get into autophagy. You created such a big demand for calories, you don't have any fat reserve, and you have a very high metabolic rate, so the cells goes into crisis very fast. It's like the company that has no money in the bank and is burning fast. The CEO has to quickly fix the function of the cell. Now, most people are getting a little bit of weight. They're not super runners in the morning, and so I don't know if most people are even touching an autophagy in hour 16, and maybe they need 24 hours, maybe they need 2 days, etc. So the science of the fasting mimicking diet, Dr. Longo, again, going back, he approaches like pharma every nutrition topic. He did mice trials, then human trials, and a lot of it is showing that you need several days of fasting to be able to induce deep metabolic effects, meaning lose the right level of weight, allow the adjustments and everything positive coming from that, and to also impact the cells and the rejuvenation. And ideally, it was 3 to 5 days, and nobody's going to go on water fast. I mean, there are very, very few people that can do it, and it's unsafe also for most if you want to still operate or go to work and or do some level of exercise or driving or whatever daily activities. So it was the National Institute of Health seeing the major benefits of the prolonged period of fasting in mice, and it was a lot of benefits on at that level, that they say, well, we'd be happy to sponsor you to develop the fasting mimicking diet. Can you feed people over 5 days while keeping the signals of fasting in the body? And it's an oxymoron, isn't it? Like how you're able to do that. So that's part 2. I'll get into the ingredients and how to do that. But the need to fast with food comes from the fact that when you prolong your fast, you get the true cellular and metabolic benefits. It's not the 16 hours of great balancing act of weight, which has a lot of benefits, downstream benefits. The cellular autophagy, maybe very few people will get some. Again, if they have very high need for calories in the morning and the exercise and have high metabolic rate, they don't have enough fat to quickly burn it. So the need to fast with food was a safety and efficacy to help people go 4 to 5 days of fast and get the cellular and metabolic benefits. Now, how you feed people and you keep them in a fasting mode. So a cell detects two out of the macronutrients. So we have 3 macronutrients. You have fat, you have carbs, and you have proteins. Fat is not a signal to a cell of macronutrient. The 2 signals to a cell that there's enough nutrition are actually the proteins and the carbs. And there are some hormones that get produced, like insulin, like growth factor, that also impacts the signal. So the fasting mimicking diet is actually high in good fat, which the cell would not recognize, and is low in carbs, but not super low. It's not as low as the ketogenic diet, and we're going to talk about that. It's low in carbs, but it's specific complex carb that we study for you to consume, and then when spread around the cells of the body, they don't feed enough a cell to say, okay, I'm satisfied, I'm fully satisfied. And the same with amino acids and the proteins. We study every amino acid, what spikes IGF, what spikes insulin from the carb level, and how to find the right sequences in nature that you can give at the right time of the day, with the right absorption level, with the right mixage to get to the cell, feed the cell without the cell feeling that it's satisfied. So to simplify all the, because it's like 77 ingredients, the fasting over there is 77 ingredients, 371 patents now filed globally, and a lot of complexity about how to achieve a very healthy, plant-based nutrition over 5 days and still be fasting. But to summarize it, going back to that CEO who needs $2 million a month to operate, if I give him $600,000 instead of $2 million, and I earmark the $600,000 to paying salaries of the staff and ordering the supply to survive the next month, and I keep him hungry on what he needs to adjust, he's going to go and adjust the other parts of the company. And that's the goal of the fasting mimicking diet, is to fund meaning nourish your body and make it safe and compliant while keeping the pressure on the cell to go and rejuvenate.
So with this diet, can you give some examples of some foods that, and the times of day, and I guess for lack of a better word, the dosing that you would do of this?
Yeah, I mean, we provided already formulated is the product in the market is called Prolon. I don't know if you're familiar with with the product, but Prolon is a 5 days. It's a box that comes to you, and yeah, it contains 5 different boxes. Each one is your food for the day, and the format is a morning bar. It's called the Fast Bar, which also exists in retail, and the core, the backbone of it is high-end nuts, the macadamia nuts, the pecan nuts, plus proteins coupled with specific carbs and specific nutrients, micronutrients. And then you have at lunch, you get your crackers and your soup and your olives, and then you have a snack afterwards, a Choco Crisp snack, and you have your dinner, which is a soup and some crackers and olives at night. So you feel like you're eating a breakfast bar. It's a fast bar. We even have that in retail. And we have randomized clinical trials showing that if you consume the bar, your blood glucose and your blood ketones are equal as to water fast, fully published in Nutrients. If you want to look it up, the top nutrition journal called Nutrients. We show you that if you consume the bar or you stay on water, you have the same ketones level, no statistical significance on it, and the same glucose the next day. And then you have your lunch and your dinner. But it's not like a DIY thing you can do at home. Again, it's 77 ingredients and very well produced in time, so that if you go over on certain ingredients, your body will recognize the food and will go off fasting, and then it becomes a very low calorie diet. So yeah, that's the science of precision nutrition.
So do you deal then with any people who might have like allergies to some of these foods or might have any kind of sensitivities? I know people, can have some issues with things like nuts and certain vegetables and things like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, today we don't have a nut-free version. And before you buy Prolon, there's a questionnaire you kind of have to take that you don't have allergies to the main ingredients. So today, we don't have a nut-free, and why not? It's easy to go back in the market and put in a nut-free version, but we're a biotech company of food, nutra-tech. We'll go back and we have to do all the studies again if you want to go with it. And this is something in the works, and we are considering if we do something like that.
Are there any supplements that you particularly, recommend with this? For instance, I know that there are some really interesting, supplements they call like Fasting-Mimicking. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like spermidine is one that's grown in popularity. There's a number of trials out there that show that it can induce autophagy and really mimic a lot of these fasting benefits. Granted, I don't know how well it does if somebody's eating like a standard American diet and taking spermidine, but if you're trying to do maybe something like a fasting mimicking diet, or you're eating maybe more keto or paleo, seems to be there's some evidence that it can definitely help turn on some of those same mechanisms.
Yeah, great question. And the science of spermidine and autophagy is coming from Frank Medeo's lab in Austria, which we have big respect for. And they actually are in the market under, I think they call the longevity labs. So we actually talk to them frequently, and we're waiting for them to, you said they have great science, which is true, a lot of preclinical work. We're waiting for the human trials to be completed and see if the same effects happen in humans, and if they do, then we'd be able to recommend or partner, which actually we're actively considering. But today we offer 2 types of supplements part of our diet, which is one is a replenishment micronutrients, and the other one is an omega, just to give the right oils, which they don't interfere with the fasting or the nutrition pathways.
And do you have people do anything like as far as their own tracking, with like a blood glucose monitor? Because I know a big selling point of that is really the individuality with a lot of these different foods, just because I don't know your menu off the top of my head, I'll go back to the nuts, like everybody has a certain glycemic response to something like walnuts. Some people walnuts, that's like completely stable blood sugar. Some people, their blood sugar goes crazy with walnuts. So, how do you account for those sorts of things?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of a prolonged fast of 5 days. You're right. If it was like, one meal or one day or a replacement of a meal, when you go, and we've tested, we have over 14 clinical trials on the fasting mimicking diet. When you go over 5 days period, you can see fluctuations on the first 2 days, because the same apply that, hey, what if you are a 250 pounder versus you're a 160 pounder? One gets into fasting faster than the other one. Your age, your grade. So that's, again, that impacts, and we talk about intermittent fasting, that's an autophagy the first few hours. But when you go 5 days, you're going to get into it. You're going to get some people a little bit earlier, some people a little bit later, but it ends up working for most.
And you're talking a lot about autophagy, and hey, this is the point kind of where we can induce autophagy. In your clinical trials, what exactly are you measuring, to show that your diet is effective? Like, are you able to measure autophagy in humans? Or I know you're talking a lot about weight too, but are you also able to measure different markers as far as, like, I don't know, cholesterol levels, blood sugar? Because of course these things play into like these lifestyle, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, these sorts of things.
All of the above, plus ketones, plus IGF and IGF-BB1, and plus insulin, and plus so it depends on the objective of the trials. We have multiple trials. Some of them are purely metabolic, that measure what you mentioned and focus more on the weight and the blood pressure, etc. Others are more cellular, and we have trials on cancer and trying to look at immune activation with cancer, trying to look at what we do in cancer cells and autophagy and all of that. Some of them are more on autoimmune or immune system, where they look at the activation and the healing of the damaged organs. So depending on the objective of the trial, but what you mentioned in many more, you can find the trials published, and because of the credibility in all of our trials, we do them at university-based, third-party universities. They get published in Cell or Science or Nature, the top 3 scientific journals of the world. And actually, 2020 and 2021, we had 4 articles in Nature. That's the #1 science journal of the world. And if you publish in Nature, you're a big disruption. So just in the span of 16 months, we had 4 articles there. I'm not going to go into the details because there's some health conditions there that we test on, and I don't want to look like claiming a product on a health condition. So I'll be silent, but everything you said and way, way, way more than that, and you can go and read these articles.
Are you guys at all doing any promotion of, certain supplements that someone like David Sinclair is a big fan of, like the NMN, NAD, NR, resveratrol, anything like that? Because, his big claim to these is that these are longevity promoting nutrients. Most of his trials are in mice, but, he has a lot of hope for these to extend lifespan in humans. So I'm curious if you guys implement anything like that.
Yeah, this goes back to, if you remember when I mentioned my story, I was like, should I go with the pill and longevity, or should I go with nutrition and longevity? And obviously we track those very, very closely, and have big respect for Dr. Sinclair, and actually is a friend to Valter, myself, and we track those very closely. We haven't outspokenly had a decision to support or onboard or recommend, because again, going back to, we're not part of the biohacking industry, we're part of the technology industry on nutrition and longevity. And like you said it pretty well, you have a lot of articles on NMN now, preclinical, and the first clinical one on safety just got published last month, actually. But we haven't seen any efficacy on longevity or longevity correlates in humans yet. So there's a high promise, and probably there will be some effect. But as we said, if you're going to take these pills every day for the next 30 years, you better also not have any side effects that can curb your longevity. So there's a lot of excitement. We actually are leaning on a positive side, but there's 2 things we would like to see: a good human trial that's showing that it's going to impact your longevity. And it doesn't have to be a 20-year trial. There's correlates of longevity. And number two, is it fully safe? Be it NAD+, be it NMN, be it metformin, be it rapamycin, the Rapalogs. There's a lot of, there's a lot of great, exciting molecules being tested. The Buck Institute is testing another, alpha-glucosidase. So there's a lot of interesting ingredients, and there's a lot of excitement. I think $800 billion 2020, 2021 went into the research for trying to find a longevity pill. And so there's a lot of excitement, but again, and we have two parts of our brains at LNutra. There's the biohacking, consumer, longevity, lifestyle medicine, but there's also the standard ways to protect people, because the last thing you want to do, Eric, is to blow something up. And this happened a little bit with keto. Keto was so big, and now a lot of the science say, hey, it's not for everyone. Some people are actually getting damaged by that. So the last thing you want to, same thing with the protein industry. Everyone is on high protein in the 90s and early 2000s, and then sorry, it was behind increasing IGF and cancer, and it boosted cancer globally big time. And you say sorry after, nobody to blame, because everyone playing the game, and we don't want to be in that. So a lot of respect for all these things. Great that they're going through trials. We're waiting to get the results, and after we'll give an opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's a great answer, because, I'm always very skeptical with a lot of these supplements, especially considering like I have a whole channel dedicated to supplements. I see how wild they can get. And, a lot of them are, I hate to say it's not snake oil, but it's the sense of like overpromise, underdeliver. And I always say this, like, every supplement has a benefit. You go to a GNC, you go to a health food store, you go on Amazon supplement section. Every supplement, you're going to say, this is for weight loss. This is for, cholesterol. This is for brain health. Everything has a supplement, a benefit. So why not just go to a GNC, throw your credit card down and go, give me one of everything, spend, $5,000, walk out with a giant shopping cart full of supplements and take one of those pills every single day. Would that make you healthier? No, it'll probably make you sick. It'll probably make put your health in a much worse place. So at the end of the day, the supplements, the pills can only do so much. If you're eating McDonald's every day and taking NMN, you're probably not going to live longer. You're probably going to live a lot shorter. And nobody's doing a clinical trial on somebody not changing their diet and taking NMN. You would have to do it with somebody who says, I'm dedicated to longevity, so I'm going to do something like a fasting mimicking diet, or like a healthy Mediterranean ketogenic type diet. Yeah. And I'm going to take resveratrol, and I'm going to take rapamycin or whatever. So there is a lot of context that gets lost in the conversation, for sure.
And I go back to something I mentioned, is that food is the only product, is the only pill we take every day since the day we're born to the day we die, and we take it 4 times a day, 3 times a day, right? And so, and it was a big choice for me, because I was coming from biotech, I was from mainstream medicine. I could have gone pill, and I had a lot of the companies that you hear about in the pill and longevity industry pitch me to lead the CEO there. And I had Dr. Longo in USC on the nutrition side. And it was like the safest that we know we put in our body is food. Safest, it could be toxic, but something that socially we can work on improving and adopting. Number 2 is the only product, as I said, that we take every day. If you think the most powerful pill, the biggest signal you can send to your genes every day, epigenetics, and how you read your genes and how you behave, is food. The environment, of course, the stress, of course, the sleep, of course, but these are temporary. The food is something you put in your body as a product, willingly so, every day, for every day of your life since the day you're born today. So it must be one of the biggest signals of longevity. A lot of people believe in pills, that the pills will create magic, and they would do on one pathway, one receptor. So the best way to drop cholesterol, you get a statin. You need much longer with food. But with that pill, you have side effects, and you impact the liver, you don't impact other organs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, hey, are we going to get to a longevity pill? Let's hope for it. Are there a lot of shots at the goal? Yes. Are they increasing by the day? Yes. Every big billionaire in San Francisco is putting money on that as well. And we hope for the best, but until we see the best, we're not going to say jump on it but hey, there's a lot of great potentials there.
And one last thing I want to ask you, kind of in with your program, have you guys done any clinical trials or any research looking at the impact of a fasting mimicking diet on something like sex hormones or thyroid function? Because for as much as, people love talking about fasting and all the health benefits and autophagy, just in my own personal experience working with people and even in myself, I noticed that, when you start going into hardcore calorie restriction, there is a negative impact on, for men, testosterone, especially. I know a lot of guys who do these, hardcore fasts, not fasting mimicking, but they do, regular longer fasts, and their testosterone is just in the can. And a lot of women dealing with, hardcore thyroid problems who, they're in their 20s and 30s doing some fasting, intermittent fasting even, and they're having some issues with that. So I'm curious if you guys have looked at that at all.
We did. And what you just mentioned is critical, because going back, and I'm going to keep mentioning the same, go back to science and do whatever is studied. And you're right, you confuse two. You mentioned three things as if they're the same. The intermittent fasting, you mentioned calorie restriction, you mentioned fasting mimicking diet. There's a reason why we picked 5 days only of fasting mimicking diet. So fasting comes as a stress to the body. And actually the first reaction is a tone up of hormones, is a tone up of muscle. So that's the benefit part. And then if you go along, you go on depletion. So you're right, chronic calorie restriction decreases actually hormones, and you start losing muscle and you start getting the depletion of the bones. The intermittent fasting and what we studied, the fasting mimicking diet, we're showing actually that we protect lean body mass. It so happened that 2 weeks ago we published actually protection of lean body mass in one of the top European journals. And we measured testosterone and the female hormones, and they stayed the same before and after. So part of picking Y5, not 10, not 30, not 60, and is exactly that, is in 5 days. So it's very simple, right? You go back to the example of the CEO who needs $2 million. If you tell him you don't have $2 million for this month, he's going to go and do his best reshuffling the company. If you keep him with no money for 6 months, he'll go bankrupt. So it's not just testosterone goes down, or is your bone density will go down, is your muscle mass will go down. But on the short term, he's super excited, he'll fix the company. So the best thing you can do at company, actually, when the company is making money and hiring people left and right and investing in 60 projects and donating left and right, you come and you tell them, hey, we're under financial constraint on the short period of time. They're going to go and actually fix it. And then you bring it back money and it flourishes in a much better direction. And that's the fasting mimicking diet. It's like taking the Formula One car or the NASCARs to the pit stop. And it has to be fast, it has to be effective, it has to rejuvenate the car and put it back on the track. Mm-hmm. You stay longer, you lose the race, and you stay longer on the track, you have fatigue and you lose the tire, and you'll. So we studied specifically to get the positive early adjustments of fasting without paying the chronic calorie restriction. Your right calorie restriction leads to the depletion. And fasting mimicking diet is not a calorie restriction, it's a 5 days mimicking of a fast while feeding you.
That's awesome. I love that way of putting it. It really contextualizes, kind of how it works. Cause again, like we think fasting, we think, oh my God, I'm going to starve, or, when someone hears fasting mimicking, it's difficult to kind of put that into a frame of mind where it makes sense. But the way with the CEO and even like the car situation, the race cars, I think that is a really simple way to grasp this concept. And again, the book by Valter Longo goes into detail. It's a great explanation of how it works. I definitely would love to reread it again just to grasp these concepts and
It's called the longevity diet. And I always have a copy here behind me, as you can see it. And I think it was published in 2018. It was, I think, Amazon's top seller. But these concepts, there were concepts, a lot of them, and probabilistic things. Now we have them in clinical trials, and they're proving it's a great read. It changed my life. It changed the lives of millions who read it. I definitely recommend that people take a look at it. It's not only fasting, but it's also how to eat every day to live a healthy, long life.
Yeah. And the fact that what your company's doing is you're basically like, making it so people can do this diet. Because again, like when it comes to diets, that is the biggest hurdle for people is how to actually do it. And you guys are literally delivering the products to people spread, with the directions on how to do it. So it's really fail safe, it seems like.
Well, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And just to clarify for everyone that's exactly the mission, is to put Prolon, the fasting-mimicking diet, or the fast bar in the hands of people. The founder, Professor Longo, he pledged to donate all his shares, 100% actually. He doesn't take a penny from us, to the Create Cures Foundation. So this is truly a mission for USC and for the founder to build the company to get the products in the hands of people and use most of the profits to give it back as donations to the Create Cures Foundation.
That's awesome. That's so cool to hear. Well, Dr. Joseph Antoun, I think we could wrap it up here. Before we head out, is there anywhere that the listener or viewer can go to learn more about LNutra, about you, if they would like to connect with you, follow what LNutra is doing, get signed up on your program? Where is the best place for someone to go? Yeah, I mean, the website is L for longevity nutra.com. We're on social, whether it's L-Nutra, whether it's the products, Prolon, Fast Bar. We're launching the one-day reset first week of February. A lot of people want to do the one-day fasting mimicking diet. You can follow me on social, Joseph Antoun. On most of the platforms, you'll find me right away. So please do. Awesome. And I'll be sure to link all that in the show notes when we release this. Dr. Joseph Antoun, again, thank you so much for joining me on the Holistic Nootropics podcast. It was truly an honor to speak with you. I enjoyed it, Eric. Definitely. And listener, viewer, if you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe, leave a comment down below on whatever you're listening to this or watching this on. And for more on all things Holistic Nootropics podcast, head on over to holisticnootropics.com. Until next time, peace.
Thanks for listening. For more brain-boosting info, in-depth articles, and show notes, check out holisticnootropics.com.